I never thought I'd be sitting across from my parents in their now empty boardroom, watching them beg for my help. Life has a strange way of coming full circle. 10 years ago, I sat in this same room, listening to them tell me I was throwing my life away. Now they're the ones whose lives are crumbling. I'm Michael Chen, 35, founder and CEO of InnovaTech Solutions. But a decade ago, I was just the disappointing son who dared to dream beyond the walls of Chen Manufacturing, our family's traditional manufacturing business that my grandfather built from nothing. "You're betraying everything your grandfather worked for," Dad had shouted that day, his face red with anger. "This tech startup nonsense, it's a fantasy. You'll come crawling back when you fail." Mom's words had cut even deeper. "We didn't put you through business school for you to abandon your responsibilities. You're being selfish and ungrateful." I remember the weight of the resignation letter in my hand, the trembling in my fingers as I placed it on the polished mahogany table. "I have to try," I'd said quietly. "I see where manufacturing is heading. If we don't adapt to new technologies, we'll be left behind. Let me prove it to you." "Prove what?" Dad had scoffed. "That you can waste your inheritance chasing pipe dreams. You want to throw away real manufacturing for some computer games." "They're not games," I tried to explain for the 100th time. "Industrial automation software could revolutionize how factories operate. We could implement it here first, then." Enough. Dad's fist had slammed against the table. "If you walk out that door, don't expect any support from us. Not a penny of company resources or your trust fund." I'd stood then, my decision made. "I don't want your money, I want your understanding." Understanding? Mom's laugh had been bitter. "You're worth nothing without this company. Remember that when you fail." I walked out that day with nothing but my savings, my engineering degree, and an idea that wouldn't let me sleep at night. The first year was brutal. I worked out of my cramped studio apartment, surviving on instant noodles and coffee. Every rejection from potential investors felt like it proved my parents right. But I had one advantage they'd never understood. I knew both worlds. I'd grown up on factory floors, understanding the real challenges manufacturers faced. Combined with my software expertise, I could create solutions that actually worked in practice, not just in theory. The breakthrough came when a small local manufacturer took a chance on my prototype. The results were immediate: 30% increase in efficiency, 45% reduction in errors, and significant cost savings. Word spread quickly in the industry. Within 3 years, InnovaTech had grown from a one-man operation to a team of 50. By year 5, we had offices in 3 countries and a client list that included some of the biggest names in manufacturing. The industry awards and magazine covers followed, but I never forgot those early days of struggle. I tried to reach out to my parents several times during those years, sent them company updates, press clippings, even holiday cards. The responses were always the same: short, cold acknowledgments if they responded at all. I learned to live with the distance, building a new family among my team and friends. Then came the anonymous email last month. Someone inside Chen Manufacturing warning me that the company was in serious trouble. Massive debt, failing equipment, lost contracts. At first, I thought it might be a competitor trying to manipulate me. But my discreet inquiries confirmed everything. The company that had been my family's pride for 3 generations was on the verge of collapse. I didn't expect them to reach out, certainly not like this, with a desperate phone call on a Sunday morning. "Michael," Mom's voice had trembled. "We need to talk. Please." So here I am, back in the boardroom where I started my journey. The room looks smaller now, worn. The once pristine walls show water damage. The leather chairs are cracked. Everything feels tired, dated. A perfect reflection of the company's state. Mom and Dad sit across from me, their faces lined with worry. Dad's hair has gone completely gray, and Mom's designer outfit can't hide how much weight she's lost. The familiar urge to please them, to earn their approval, tugs at my heart. But I'm not that insecure young man anymore. "We should have listened," Dad says, staring at his clasped hands. "We were wrong about everything." "The company's dying," Mom adds, her voice breaking. "We need your help, Michael. Not just your money, your expertise. You were right about technology being the future." I opened my laptop, pulling up the documents I'd gathered over the past month. "Before we discuss any potential investment, I need to understand exactly what happened. Walk me through the last 10 years. They exchanged nervous glances. Perhaps we could focus on solutions rather than the past. Dad suggests carefully. No, I say firmly, understanding the past is crucial for any solution. Let's start with the Peterson contract. You lost it 3 years ago, correct? Mom pales slightly. How did you know about that? I make it my business to know things, Mom. Just like I know about the rejected modernization proposals from your senior engineers. The ones you dismissed without review. We had our reasons, Dad starts defensively. I'm sure you did. I interrupt, pulling out more documents. Just like you had reasons for covering up the safety violations, for faking maintenance records, for borrowing money from pension funds. Their faces turn ashen as I lay out paper after paper, building a trail of deliberate mismanagement and corruption. Michael, Mom whispers, you don't understand. Actually, I understand perfectly, I say, my voice steady despite the anger burning in my chest. You didn't just ignore the future, you actively sabotaged it. Every attempt at modernization, every young manager who tried to implement changes, you shut them all down. Because admitting they were right meant admitting you were wrong about me. Dad slumps in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 70 years. We were trying to protect your grandfather's legacy. No, I shake my head. You were protecting your pride, and now 300 families might lose their jobs because of it. The silence that follows is heavy with 2 generations of mistakes. I close my laptop, gathering my documents. I'll need time to review everything properly. Have your financial team send over the complete records. The real ones, not the versions you show the board. You'll help us then? Mom asks, hopefully. I stand, straightening my jacket. I haven't decided yet. But unlike you, I'll make my decision based on facts, not pride. I'll be in touch. As I walk out of the boardroom, my phone buzzes with a text from Claire, my head of research. Found something interesting in the old contracts. You need to see this. I text back quickly, on my way. Get the team together. The truth about Chen Manufacturing's downfall is still unfolding. But one thing's already clear. My parents' betrayal runs deeper than anyone suspects. And soon they'll learn exactly how much their actions cost them. The InnovaTech conference room fell silent as Claire finished her presentation. 20 pairs of eyes turned to me, waiting for my reaction. On a screen behind her, the evidence of my parents' betrayal was laid out in devastating detail. You're absolutely certain about this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Claire's reputation for thorough research was one reason I'd hired her as my head of investigations. Completely, she nodded, clicking to the next slide. We've triple-checked everything. The pattern goes back almost 8 years. Every time Chen Manufacturing faced a major decision about modernization, they deliberately chose the worst option. But here's the interesting part. They didn't just reject new technology. They actively invested in obsolete systems. Show me the money trail again, I requested, leaning forward. The next slide revealed a complex web of transactions. At its center was a company called Traditional Manufacturing Solutions, or TNS. My father's college roommate, Richard Parker, was listed as its CEO. TNS supplied Chen Manufacturing with outdated equipment at inflated prices, Claire explained. The equipment was often refurbished or sometimes completely defunct. Your parents paid premium prices for essentially worthless machinery. Mark, my CFO, spoke up from the end of the table. The numbers don't make sense unless they were getting kickbacks, I finished, the taste of bile rising in my throat. They were deliberately running the company into the ground while padding their own accounts. The realization hit me like a physical blow. All those years, their resistance to change hadn't just been about pride or tradition. They'd been profiting from the company's decline, probably planning to sell off the assets before everything collapsed. There's more, Claire said quietly, pulling up another document. We found this in the employee records. Every time a worker raised concerns about the equipment or suggested modernization, they were either fired or transferred to dead-end positions. The human cost. I raised my hand, needing a moment to process. 300 families depended on Chen Manufacturing. People who'd given decades of their lives to the company, who trusted my parents to protect their livelihoods. And all this time, what about the pension fund? I asked, dreading the answer. Mark grimaced, almost completely drained. They've been using it to cover operating costs and their inflated equipment purchases. Most of the workers have no idea their retirement savings are gone. The room fell silent again. Everyone knew what this meant. If this information became public, my parents wouldn't just lose the company, they'd face criminal charges. The family name would be ruined. Part of me wanted to protect them, despite everything. They were still my parents. But I thought about Mr. Zhang, our old foreman, who'd given me my first tour at the factory floor when I was 10. About Mrs. Liu in accounting, who'd snuck me candies when I did my homework in her office after school. About all the families who trusted us with their futures. Get me everything, I said finally. Every document, every transaction, every piece of evidence. And call Andrew. Andrew Chen, my grandfather's oldest friend and the company's former legal counsel, arrived at my office 2 hours later. His eyes were grave as he reviewed the evidence. Your grandfather would be heartbroken, he said finally, setting down the last document. Not about the company failing. Businesses can always be rebuilt. But this level of betrayal. I need your advice, I said. Not just legally, but ethically. These people trusted us. Andrew was quiet for a long moment. Your grandfather had a saying. A Chen always pays their debts. He didn't just mean money. He meant responsibility, honor, doing right by people who depend on you. I nodded, remembering how many times I'd heard those words growing up. What would you do? The question, Andrew said gently, is what will you do? You're not just Michael Chen anymore. You're the CEO of a successful company, but more importantly, you're the grandson of a man who built his legacy on trust and integrity. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with my parents and the Chen Manufacturing Board of Directors. The boardroom was packed. Every member had come, sensing the gravity of the situation. Before we begin, I said, standing at the head of the table where my father used to sit, I want to make something clear. What happens in this room will affect hundreds of families. Whatever personal feelings we have must come second to our responsibility to them. I nodded to Claire, who began distributing folders to everyone present. Inside these folders, you'll find detailed evidence of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and criminal mismanagement spanning the last 8 years. The room erupted in shocked murmurs as people opened their folders. My mother's face went white. My father started to stand, but I held up my hand. Don't, I said quietly. Just listen. For the next hour, I laid out everything we'd discovered. The kickback scheme with Tianas, the drained pension funds, the deliberate sabotage of modernization efforts. With each revelation, my parents seemed to shrink in their chairs. You have a choice, I said when I finished. Option 1. I take this evidence to the authorities. The company will face a criminal investigation and everyone involved will likely face prosecution. You wouldn't, my mother whispered. We're your parents. Option 2, I continued as if she hadn't spoken. InnovaTech buys Chen Manufacturing. I'll invest the capital needed to modernize operations and save the jobs. But there are conditions. I pulled out another document. First, you both resign immediately. Second, you repay every penny you took from the pension fund. I have a forensic accountant's exact figure. Third, you sign over any remaining shares to a trust that will benefit the employees. You can't do this, my father protested weakly. The company is our legacy. No, I corrected him. It was grandfather's legacy, and you betrayed it. Now it's my responsibility to fix what you broke. The board voted unanimously to accept my offer. Within a week, the papers were signed. My parents, faced with the choice between prosecution and compliance, chose to comply. They emptied their overseas accounts to repay the pension fund and quietly retired to a much smaller house in Florida. The transformation of Chen Manufacturing took 18 months of intense work. We replaced the outdated equipment, retrained workers, and implemented the very systems I'd dreamed of a decade ago. Productivity soared. The company didn't just survive, it thrived. 6 months after the takeover, I received a letter from Mr. Zhang, the old foreman who'd first shown me around the factory. Your grandfather would be proud, he wrote. Not because you saved the company, but because you remembered what he always said. A Chen always pays their debts. I keep that letter framed in my office now, next to my grandfather's old work ID. Sometimes, late at night when I'm reviewing reports or planning new innovations, I look at his photo and hope he would approve of the choices I made. My parents still send occasional emails, short, formal messages about their health or the weather in Florida. I respond with equal brevity. Some bridges, once burned, can never be fully rebuilt. But I've made peace with that. Last week, I gave my first tour to my 5-year-old daughter, Emma, showing her the same factory floor where I first fell in love with manufacturing. She asked endless questions about how everything worked, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Can I help make things better someday?" she asked, watching the robots I designed move with precise grace through their tasks. "Of course you can, sweetheart," I told her, thinking of all the lessons learned, all the hard choices that brought us here. "Just remember what your great-grandfather always said. A Chen always pays their debts." She nodded solemnly, too young to understand the weight of those words. But someday she will, and hopefully she'll build on this legacy with more wisdom than the generation before her. As for me, I've learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is holding people accountable for their actions. It's not about revenge or even justice, it's about responsibility, about protecting the trust that others place in you. My parents called me worthless once. But worth isn't measured in dollars or company shares. It's measured in the promises you keep, the trust you maintain, and the legacy you leave for the next generation. That's a lesson worth more than any inheritance.